Hi folks, welcome to another episode of Crabs of Our Lives, Bob's Crab House, all crab soap opera. It's been a minute since my last post, sorry about that, but here we are. I wanted to say thank you guys so much for the nice comments, some great questions and suggestions from other crabbers who have a ton of experience, and I'm really excited to test out some of the things that we learned and... oh, jeez. Okay, well, number one rule of crabbing is to put your traps where the crabs are. So how on target was that? That is a Dungeness crab. I'm sure he's fine. That's why they have their shells. I'm glad that wasn't an octopus or something more squishy. And this was during the time. So this was end of the season. So it's not when they just molted. So he will be fine, I think. Maybe we should name this guy Lucky. Or maybe Unlucky, depending on the next few minutes. Come on, Lucky. Wake up. Anyway, I was about to say that since this is from last season, we're not going to be seeing any of the cage or bait modifications that I'm doing that from things we learned over the last ones and some ideas you guys have had. Definitely some cool things coming up for next season that I want to test. And I was going to say, even though I haven't watched this one, I didn't get skunked at all last year, so I know some crabs were coming up. And I was also pretty confident we were going to, see some cool stuff, some of the behaviors we've been looking at. I did not expect to see or to cause... Oh, there he goes. All right, Lucky. Looks like that little fish woke him up. All right, so he's fine. Didn't expect to cause an asteroid strike. I think... Okay, so we know he's fine. I'm gonna pause and run that back in slow motion because I want to see what happened there. So here we are getting close to the bottom, and run, Lucky, run! Got him again. So those are not pieces of his shell there. Those are, I was worried about that. That looks like pieces of just some clamshell. So, all right, we know he's all right. We're back to real time now. And he's coming up. Okay, he made it up through the bars. That means he's a short and probably has already scooched out of the trap. So that was good. If this, you wouldn't drop a Dungeness crab pot on rocks, but if he had found an unlucky rock and I hit him like that, that could have been bad. But the fact that it's sand, which is where the Dungeness crabs live, in the sand and the mud, he's going to be fine. And maybe this is a good time to talk crab shells. Because this was from late last season, I know this guy was wearing his full strength protective gear, his football helmet. If he had very recently shed his shell, then this trap would have squashed him like a bug. And so crabs can't grow in their hard shell. You've all touched crabs, you know how hard they are. And they don't grow like... like a clam adds layers and gets bigger, or a conch or a mollusk or a tree just keeps adding layers. Crabs don't do that, so it's kind of dead tissue, just a protective exoskeleton. So they have to molt that periodically. And they do that a whole bunch when they're real little. Once they grow their shells, I think in the first couple of years, they do it 6 times a year. So because they want to grow fast, so they can get, there's a English sole or a sand dab. They molt a bunch when they're really young because they want to grow as fast as they can and get a nice good shell to protect them. And then once they're adults, they do it once a year after that. And it's really cool when it's time for them to molt, their shell cracks open in the back. It opens up, like the trunk of a car, and then they yank themselves, eyeballs and all, antennas, everything comes out of that exoskeleton, and they just wriggle out of it. It's like, after the winter when somehow magically your wetsuit or your Under Armour shirts have somehow gotten way too small for you. It's like taking one of those off That's what I assume it feels like, taking one of those off over your head. So if you've ever, I mean, everybody's been on the beach and you see oh, look, it's a dead crab. Well, it's not, almost always not a dead crab. If you pick that up, it'll feel like it's hollow, but it looks like a whole crab. But you'll notice the back is opened, and it's very light, it's hollow, and that's just the old shell that they've shed. The living crab is still out there now as a temporarily squishier critter, a soft shell crab. You've heard of those. And it's very cool. That lasts a couple of days. While they're soft, they can pump themselves, or they do pump themselves up with water. That's how they grow. It's kind of like pumping up a pool float. And once they're mature, each time they shed their hard shell and they're soft, they can pump themselves up so they grow about another inch. And they do that year after year, lose another shell, grow another inch. And once they pump themselves up to the max size for that year, the shell starts to harden. And it's pretty hard it's pretty hard after 2 days, but it takes about a month for it to reach its full protective. So if you're a boy crab and you shed your shell, and males and females shed their shells at different times of the year, and we can understand why when we talk about mating. But if you're a boy crab, you shed your shell and then you just bury yourself in the sand and you stay under there. So we know that Lucky here was not a soft shell crab, because he would have been under the sand. So they bury themselves until they get hard enough to kind of protect themselves. But the females, they shed later in the season, and that's when they can mate. They can't mate with the hard shells on there. So once they're getting close, once they become what we would call, back east, you call them shedders or peelers, that means they're about to shed. Once they start getting squishy inside and know that they're going to do that, they start putting out pheromones, which attracts male crabs. And then the males will, so they don't bury themselves under the sand. This is their time they have to mate. So a male will come along, and actually I've got video. So I'm going to do a little digression. I'm going to throw in some other video right here because I have some of that. So this is a pair of red rock crabs. The male is the bigger, the female is the smaller one. And this is the mating hug. They're not actually mating, but she's put out those pheromones to say she's getting ready to molt her shell. And so males will come along and pick her up and then just escort her, protect her, kind of also saying she's mine during this season. And they'll be aggressive to other males. But he's waiting for her to actually shed her shell. And that's the only time that they can mate. So he'll carry her around until she's ready to shed. Then he'll put her down and then just stand guard over her while she sheds and while she's very vulnerable. And then he gets to mate with her, and that's cool. That's how they do it. And then females will eventually fertilize the eggs they have inside them and then carry them under their tail, like we saw before. How you tell the difference between a male and a female crab is the tail that's tucked up underneath them, and hers is big and wider than the male. And I'm not sure about red rocks. I know Dungeness crabs females will carry 1 million to I think over 2 million eggs at a time, and we call them buried, B-E-R-R-I-E-D. They're a buried crab when they have those, and if you ever pull up one of those, you have to be really careful. But the seasons are timed so that you don't catch them during that thing. We're not getting any crabs right here. I'm sorry for anybody who's using this as like a meditation. It's kind of meditating. You can look at the stuff floating by, but I want us to have some crab action going on. So I'm just going to play this at a higher speed for a little bit. So as I scrubbed through, I saw this. So this is right now at 1,000%, so 10 times speed. See all those little black things? I thought they were moving so slow, I thought it was just pieces of the bottom. But now I noticed when I was scrubbing that they're moving different directions. And if you look at the lower left, you can see one closer up. It's a snail. See his little snail tail on his antennas. I think it's, I hope somebody, I'm horrible at those kind of mollusks, at the seashells. I think they're dog winkles or whelks. Maybe somebody knows better than me, but it's kind of cool that there's an entire herd of them going by. So, all right, I'm going to go back to a fast speed until something happens. All right, back to real time, and we're all I was looking up. So there's one. So, but I know. Okay, here the one comes in. So I can look at my scrub line without looking at the video. So I can kind of react to this. I just saw on the video timeline that there was noise in there, and the noise in there has to be these guys touching the cage. So, all right, we finally got one that went around the back, who's up current now. Now we've got this. Definitely looks legal size in here. That's a Dungeness crab. We know that because it doesn't have the black tip. Here's another one. Another Dungeness. They don't have the black tips on their claws. Also, when they're side by side, you can really tell the color difference in these. We can't tell what sex they are yet. And so this is good. So now we know there's 3 crabs around. And a little worried about that we don't see the bait coming out. So, and one of the first ones, we got really lucky because there was an aggressive red rock in there who was smart enough. Rocky knew how to stick his back claws, those really pointy ones, inside the can of mackerel and then spread that out. And then that all drifted all around. And one thing that draws them in, I mean, we know they're being attracted, so they can smell it. But the thing I worry about is if there's not bait coming out. So if this was some big pieces of chicken or, a fish fillet or a fish head or something like that, that you have it leaning against the bait cage, they'd be able to be grabbing pieces of it and eating it. So hopefully one of these crabs will be able to stick a leg in there and start pulling bait out. Because what I get concerned about is if they're not, getting satisfied, if they're not eating, then, so all right, so the crab in the back corner is already looking for a way out. And maybe if they can't fit out, that one sits hard with the forced perspective of the lens. That might be legal because the back corner is really not that far away. This one in the foreground does look big. That white dot on the back is the barnacle. And so even that one, maybe just looking for another angle, but they're not getting any food. So the scent will draw them in. And, if you're, you're crabbing, the idea of this for me is to get a good bait and a short drop time. Lazy summer afternoons, you can leave the pot down there forever, but around here, like we talked before, there are tens of thousands of these crab traps that are lost every year just from the recreational fishery. So what I'd really love people to do is to be able to crab in as short a period of time as possible and then just float around and drink beer. Or do whatever you want, get a suntan, drop more pots. You're allowed a certain amount of legal sized crabs every day. And if you can get multiple drops in, you're testing more spots. You're finding better spots until you limit out for all your limit holders on the boat. So want a bait that's going to draw them in and one that's going to keep them in. We don't know what the escape rate is. It hasn't been very high, but with this type of trap, I think there will be a certain escape rate because crustaceans are not the smartest animals. Mollusks, some are. You have octopus that are very smart. They would sit in here until the last second and then get out. But crustaceans, not so smart. But eventually they're going to find the swinging trap, I guess, or the swinging door and get out. Although when I've seen ghost gear down there, you'll find them sometimes filled with crabs, so they wound up never being able to get out. But as we've talked about the door limitations on these, sometimes the crabs are getting stuck getting in, but they swing freely, and they eventually, let's see if this guy swings the door. Maybe he's trying to get he's not trying to get his back leg in there. So I'd prefer to see this bait actually coming out. So that would make me think that maybe I should loosen it up in there. What I've also been doing is semi-freezing the cans because, it's the scent that's going to draw them in. So I figured freezing it just a little bit, not that it was solid, but I wanted it to last for a full hour. I didn't know when I first started these cans how quickly the bait would go out. And as you know from when you open your tuna can, that there's juice in there, and that juice is where the scent is. So I kind of wanted that frozen a little bit so it would at least take 20 minutes or so before all the scent was gone, or most of the scent was gone. And then of course the meat, the flesh of the mackerel will still give off scent, but not as much. And I guess I was again. So this is from last season, so I'm not putting in any of the fixes that we've learned yet because I haven't had another season since I started doing this. So I'm going to think about that. Maybe I will kind of chop up, open the cans early, chop them up, maybe split it into 2 cans because I always come up after an hour with a lot of bait left in that can, at least half of it, even when the crabs have gotten inside of it. So I can probably half it. Which will even save more money, and it's already inexpensive. Oh, here we go. Here's our another volunteer. See if he gets stuck. I can take a drink while he's coming in. Where'd he go? He was coming in. We know we have 2 inside. And maybe a 3rd. Maybe that's a good spot to stop. We'll have some drama. Will the 3rd crab come in or not? Is the 2nd crab missing? Or is he just on top of the camera? All right, tune in for the next one. Thanks, guys.